Record heat is continuing across much of the US over the next week. We've had unprecedented extreme heat for March over the past few days. The heat will be easing off a little bit, but will still continue and still be quite hot for March standards, even after a brief cool down. We also have some severe weather concerns, we have some fire weather concerns, and we're taking a look into the future as to when this pattern could change to bring some more lasting cooler weather. Today is Sunday, March 22nd, and today in the weather world, we'll dive into all the details you need to know, both about the heat and the severe storm potential. I want to start off again tracking the weather pattern because this is what's going to be driving all of the heat and storms over the next few days. This right here out in the west, this is a big bubble that was responsible for the record-breaking heat in the desert southwest this past weekend when Phoenix was able to get up to 105. We had some spots reach as high as 112. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Notice how that ridge kind of flattens out as we go into this weekend. We don't have that big bubble. Instead, it's more kind of a flat, broader ridge that's encompassing more areas. So this kind of expands the heat, but it also lessens off the intensity a little bit. Over the next few days, we have a weak cold front coming in, some briefly cooler air over portions of the east, but look back out into the west, the ridge will try to rebuild again as we go into middle portions of the week. So this is on Wednesday. We see another dome of high pressure starting to build in the west. Not as strong as the last one, but this will still be strong enough to bring more record-breaking temperatures and extend this heat wave out for much of the week. It does look like as we get into next weekend, a stronger cold front will push through the middle and eastern parts of the country, and this will bring more of a definitive end to the heat and make it feel more typical for spring, more like March and April rather than the summer-like pattern we've been in. So until that happens though, we still have some heat to go with, especially with that ridge rebuilding, and a lot more 80s, 90s, and more records are expected to fall. Before we get to that, let's talk about the severe weather risk. We do have a slightly elevated threat for severe weather just for today, for Sunday. So this kind of escalated a little bit and might catch some of you off guard. We're not expecting a big severe weather outbreak, but if you're in the yellow shade, watch out for scattered severe storms, and especially in this orange shade, that's where more numerous severe storms are possible. This includes Indiana, Ohio, Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Y'all are at risk here. We have a slight to enhanced risk for severe weather. First off, the tornado risk is pretty low. Can't rule out an isolated tornado, but definitely not a tornado outbreak. It's more the wind threat we're tracking, especially across Pennsylvania, including Pittsburgh. Damaging winds from downbursts are possible, with some wind gusts of 60 to even 70 miles per hour in some of these black hatch lines. And we're also tracking some hail. Hail will be most concentrated in this red shade. Again, Pennsylvania, that's kind of the highlight. Anywhere though here in this broader black hatching, that's where some large hail is possible, if not a little bit more scattered in coverage. One of the things driving our system is we have a lot of instability in place. This is a convective available potential energy. It's basically measuring thunderstorm fuel, and some of these colors here, that's 500, maybe up to 1,000 joules per kilogram of energy available. So that's pretty significant and enough for some of these storms to get going. We are limited a little bit by moisture. We have relatively dry air in place that make it hard for widespread severe storms, but some of this instability combined with pretty warm temperatures for this time of year, that's what's kind of leading to our severe weather. Notice how all the Cape gets gobbled up as those storms come up, and our severe weather threat will really diminish overnight. So tracking it out, it's really over the next few hours in Pennsylvania. That's when these storms form, and initially we'll have these supercellular type storms. Any of these cells will be capable of some of that large hail. Some gusty winds are possible. Eventually the storms will congeal more into a line, and when that happens, it'll really be gusty winds. That's the main threat. So I mentioned we have some of that drier air. This will actually enhance the wind threat a little bit because the dry air as the rain falls will help cool the air. This is called evaporative cooling, and cooling the atmosphere, that makes the air more dense and heavy. So some of the thunderstorms, as they're collapsing, a lot of dense and heavy air spreads down to the ground, and as that splays out, that can bring some gusty winds. So that's one of our concerns, as well as the hail. The storms will really weaken as they move further south and fall apart into Virginia and portions of New England. Again, the threat is really highest across Pennsylvania, portions of the Ohio Valley. Through this afternoon, once we get past sunset, storms will be weakening, and then after that, all is quiet. You can't see it here, but some of this on the backside is actually some light snow that could be falling. Boston, you could be seeing a few flakes later on Monday on the backside of the system, but no meaningful snowfall there. Some of the higher snowfall totals are possible across Maine and upper New England. So again, not a major outbreak, but just something we're watching today for Sunday for some severe storms possible. Just be on the lookout for that. Hey, we're also tracking some fire weather concerns over portions of the southern plains extending into the desert southwest. This really is fueled by the dry air, the heat that's been taking place with 90s, even triple-digit temperatures, as well as some gusty winds. So especially in this red shade, that's where we have critical fire weather conditions possible. Broadening out though in this orange shade, more elevated conditions. This doesn't mean there is an active fire, but any potential fires that start could very quickly and rapidly spread. So we just want to make sure we're doing our part to limiting any fire potential. No burning across this area, especially if you're under a red flag warning. One of the things fueling this risk is some gusty winds. Notice we have a weak cold front. I'll talk about that in a second. But as this cold front arrives, especially behind it, the winds will pick up out of the north, some gusty winds possible before things generally subside later on Monday. Alright, let's talk about the future a bit. Let's talk about the heat that's coming, as well as that slight cool down early week. So you could kind of see that front pretty clearly here. Notice a boundary between some of the relatively cooler air in the north, nothing winter-like, nothing very cold, but compared to the record heat we have been, it'll feel a lot cooler. And then we can see that record heat that's still building out, especially right to the south of that front. Well, some of that heat will give way over the next few days. So for Monday and Tuesday, especially over the central and eastern US, some briefly cooler air will establish itself. Notice the west though, you will stay toasty over the next few days. The heat in the west, as that ridge strengthens, will eventually expand back. So we're gonna have a renewed surge of heat over the central plains. And even though it'll briefly get cooler early week, don't get fooled, because middle to end of the week it'll get hotter again, and we'll be back in the 80s and 90s. A lot of records will be falling once again. After middle of the week though, to the end of the week, we get a more significant cold front, and this looks to bring a lot cooler air in with it. This could potentially bring a lot more impacts. With cooler air, a lot of winds possible, and also some storms as the front comes through, maybe even some snow on the backside. But this should end the heat wave, at least for much of the eastern 2/3 of the country. Again, the west will stay on the warmer side, maybe not as warm as it has been, but for the rest of us, a bit of a temperature roller coaster. Cooler early week, back hotter midweek, and then colder again late week. First though, we do still just want to talk about the unprecedented nature of the heat wave over the past weekend. Portions of the western US, these are all the cities that have broken their all-time March record in this heat wave. Some notables: Phoenix hit 105, Tucson 101, Yuma we hit 109, Sacramento we hit 88 degrees, so that is very hot. And then up to the north, these are the mountains. This is where we're supposed to have snow. Look at this, Salt Lake City we had 81 degrees, Denver 85 degrees. That's absolutely ridiculous. Unfortunately, the snowpack is really suffering. We've already had a really hot and dry winter with very limited snow, and any snow that's remaining is quickly melting with some of this heat, which is bad news not only for skiers but also for the water supply as we head into the summer months. By the way, by the end of this heat wave, Phoenix could hit 11 daily records in a row, meaning for 11 straight days we're setting new records. So it's not only the intensity of the heat wave, it's the longevity of it. This is a pretty long-lasting summer-like pattern that's really staying for some time for the desert Southwest. We also did break a country record. We hit 112 degrees in Yuma, New Mexico, among other spots in California last Friday. This is the hottest temperature ever recorded in the month of March in the United States of America. The previous record was 108, so we broke it by a full 4 degrees, believe it or not. And in total, we had over 160 cities set new March records. So again, a pretty unbelievable heat wave. Now over the next few days, again, notice we have that brief cool down over central and eastern US, 36 in St. Louis, 30s across portions of the plains. Compared to the 90s we had this past weekend, it will feel like a bit of a shock. Even though this is more normal, this is where we're supposed to be. Just because we've been so warm, I think it'll catch many of us by surprise. The desert Southwest will be cooling off slightly. We still have some triple digits, if not upper 90s over the next few days. So Phoenix, you're gonna unfortunately be stuck in a bit of a triple digit streak. We might briefly hit 99 degrees on Monday, but then back to the triple digits Tuesday and Wednesday. The heat will expand back middle of the week in the central plains. So by Tuesday, those 70s are arriving, and then by Wednesday and Thursday, the 80s and 90s are arriving again. Lincoln and Omaha, we could be back in the 80s in the central plains. Arklatex area, we could be in the 80s. And then on Thursday, this kind of looks to be the peak of the heat right ahead of that front. Notice we could have some 90s and even triple digits across Oklahoma and portions of Texas. That front though, this is a second front that's more powerful. Notice as it comes through, much cooler air comes behind it. 50s for highs on Saturday, and a lot of freezing temperatures back for the north. What about rain chances? Well, we do have that severe weather risk, that system moving over portions of the northeast and Ohio Valley today. After that clears, we're going to be pretty quiet over much of the US. It's really courtesy of that big ridge of high pressure just sinking air that kind of suppresses and squashes any rain chances. A bit of snow possible over New England on Monday, nothing too significant. I do want to draw your attention to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle and portions of Oregon. Over the next few days, we're going to have a bit of an atmospheric river come in, bringing some heavy rain and some snow to the mountains, as well as some wind possible. So we've had a lot of rain recently. This is pretty normal for this time of year. Notice though, for the rest of us, I can take us all the way through Friday, and we're really pretty quiet. Not much weather to talk about in terms of precipitation. Now, when that second front comes, that brings a much cooler weather. This is now on your day Friday. This is when some storms, maybe some snow is possible. As I mentioned earlier, still considerable uncertainty with this, so we'll talk about that more as we get closer, but this does look to be our next weather maker. Sometime next Friday and Saturday, potential severe weather, maybe some decent snow on the backside. Details still a moving target as that front end system moves south. So with that said, rainfall totals pretty light, not too much rain to speak of. We have that slight severe weather threat over the Ohio Valley. You have that rain in the Pacific Northwest. The rest of us, though, largely dry, so we can enjoy some quieter weather over the next week. And we're really just talking about that heat building back up again. So thanks for watching, y'all. Hopefully, if you're in the path of severe storms today, you stay safe. Make sure you're staying weather aware for some of those alerts and warnings. Also, if you're in the fire weather risk, make sure you're staying safe and being very vigilant against potential fires starting. For the rest of us, though, largely hot and dry over the next few days. Looking forward to some of that cooler air start coming in next weekend. If you never want to be caught off guard by the weather, consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for watching, y'all, and I'll see you next time.